Ruslan has a huge YouTube channel and puts out a ton of good content. And like me, covered the Joe Rogan, Brian Muraresku conversation about the possible psychedelic origins of Christianity. This is an important topic, and unfortunately, I think they missed something here.
And so it's kind of unclear when the Refrigeria, a pagan Roman ceremony, became like a proto-Eucharistic Christian mass. Like the line is very blurred at this period of time, which I call the pagan continuity hypothesis. This notion that the older wine drinking consumption by the Romans, the Greeks before them, somehow influenced, at least in some cases, the earliest celebrations of the mass. And
so he's saying that the Roman customs for drinking the wine were influencing Christianity. I would beg to differ and say that perhaps the Christian influenced the Romans, or that at some point they become a hybrid in the way that as Christianity became more normalized in Rome, they started taking over the old temples of pagans and converted them into churches. That is a historical fact.
Yeah, so here's the thing. This is a good catch by Ruslan because he's right. Anybody who's concerned about historical Christianity, this should be a red flag. So the pagan Christian continuity hypothesis that Brian Muraresku is talking about, he's saying that there is an unbroken line from paganism to Christianity, that Christianity in fact came out of paganism. And it's not because people had an encounter with the resurrected Jesus. See, to me, that's everything. This is huge. It's the basis for the entire conversation that Brian Muraresku and Joe Rogan are having.
In terms of taking communion, he's kind of connecting this to some of their other funeral type rituals. I find it interesting that he's connecting it to Romans influencing Christians, and again, not the other way around, but that's neither here nor there. He's leaning into a conversation, or perhaps attempting to lean into a conversation with Joe Rogan about Christianity and the archaeology and all these different things that are discovered.
Do this in memory of me. Remember my life, death, and eventual resurrection. This is...
Ooh, there's that word, resurrection. I love when the resurrection Jesus comes up on Joe Rogan.
This is sort of the prototype for the Mass. And so it's important to remember that the funeral banquet was there to bind those together who remained faithful to the memory of Jesus after his death. It's very similar to this Roman Refrigerium.
So Ruslan is like me. He sees something going on in the Joe Rogan podcast, and he wants to share it. Okay, so we see this going on, but the idea that the Romans influenced the Christians is really here and there for this conversation. It is the point that Brian is trying to make. So even though he does talk about the resurrection, he's not using that term the way Christians would use it. He's not using that term biblically. He's talking about a tradition that Christians developed based off of an earlier pagan tradition that involved the dead. So the clue there is he talks about the prototype of the Mass being this Roman Refrigerium. The prototype of the Mass is Jesus's final supper with his disciples. You can't separate these things from the person of Jesus, and as soon as you do, you're no longer talking about Christianity. I think that's why it's so important to talk about these things.
You know, it's a little strange because, again, you're trying to figure out if this is a Roman pagan refrigerium or if this is a Christian celebration of some sort of Eucharist. Because, again, this site is controlled by the Vatican. The Vatican has preserved this for reasons. It's been said by the Pontifical Commission that these are some of the most explicit and concrete evidence for the origins of Christianity.
Wow, some of the most concrete evidences for the... So this stuff is fascinating to me that he's presenting all this. And the conversation kind of takes a weird turn where they start getting into one of the images depicting a witch that was doing sorcery and giving them drugs, psychedelic drugs, and this whole thing.
You know, whether this is purely pagan or Christian is sort of a moment of debate. But, you know, if you just look at it, what's odd is that you see 12 people gathered around a table. And when you think of 12 people gathered around a table, you think of something like the Last Supper. Mm-hmm. And so it's pretty clear that what's important to this dinner is the chalice that's being lifted by the servant there. Or maybe...
Did you hear that? What does he say is important?
Supper. Mm-hmm. And so it's pretty clear that what's important to this dinner is the chalice that's being lifted by the servant there.
What's important is the chalice. Now, of course, Christians would say, no, the thing that is important is remembering what Christ did. He died in substitution on the cross. The chalice is important for the pagan rituals that Brian and Joe are talking about. The chalice, if anything, is a vehicle for remembering. It's something that we do to remember what Christ has done. The chalice itself is not important. And the reason that the conversation kind of takes a weird turn, what Ruslan is saying, is because the conversation is not about Christianity, not the way Ruslan and I would define Christianity. They're talking about something that has been separated from the person of Christ. And then they're trying to answer the question of, okay, well, what are we looking at? We're looking at the church. We're looking at the church traditions. We're looking at church history. We're looking at Christianity separated from Jesus. Well, no, then you're not looking at Christianity. You're talking about something else. So I hope that you're seeing why this is important to give some careful consideration to this topic. It deserves the time and attention that we can give it because it is the most important thing. Because depending on how you carry on this conversation, you could be leading people away from the person of Jesus or to the person of Jesus. The best explanation for the existence of the church and the church history that we're seeing is that people, genuine, real people, had a genuine encounter with the very real resurrected Jesus. Anything else is not Christianity. So I wanted to be very clear about that. I felt like it was kind of necessary for the people who might have seen Ruslan's video. So again, we just need to give this the careful time and attention that a topic like this deserves. So if you want to check out the deep dive that I did on this subject, if you're curious to learn more, you can check that out. We did a live stream. I will link both of those. I will also put some playlists in the description of this video. So I will catch you in the next one.